So very well done for getting to halfway through our panel sessions today. As I said, we are looking to the future now for the next 40 minutes. And no, it's not going to be all about the apocalypse that's impending, nor about how Jeff Bezos is going to help save the day. But we are talking the future of tech, changes that we've seen in tech and workflows in our industry, and of course how they pertain to sustainability. My name's Katy Murdoch. I'm part of the Albert sustainability team and been with the organisation for a couple of years. I want to say a huge thank you to our coordinator for this panel, Sienna Malik, who's my wonderful colleague as well. Albert obviously collects a lot of emissions data from productions every year. In actual fact, thousands of productions. And we are able to aggregate that as well as run some quite detailed reporting on it. And we have seen in 2020 more than halving of the emissions intensity associated with 1 hour of TV. So that means the average emissions associated with 1 hour of TV. 2020, it was a global pandemic. So that it was no surprise, really. And this is an intensity metric. It's not because there was less TV. Our industry, I think, galvanized and carried on with the show on the road during COVID. It was actually because of a lot of factors. We saw more archive being used in lots of productions. We saw a lot less executive travel in productions. We also managed to get online some quite embryonic technology and really sort of push forward some technology that helped us reduce travel emissions. Things like new remote workflow systems, cloud-based workflow systems, virtual production. So here to talk about all of those, these new workflows and new technology, and of course discuss the sustainability angle of those technology systems are the men. I had to make a joke out of that. I produced this panel, and actually we have a really diverse panel of experts here. I'm quite new to a male panel of experts. I will interject as well with my own opinions and really want to hear from yourselves as well as we go on. So without further ado, I would love to welcome first to our first part of this session, Lucas Tucknott, Head of Production from Film Soho, Darren Khan, COO of Clickon and founder of Travlrr, and Mike Lethem, Sky Studios Technical Manager. If I may start with you, Lucas.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us about what you're developing now at Film Soho and why now?
Why now? I mean, there's lots of elements to Film Soho. We have distribution business, big ADR business, but we're now venturing into virtual production. So we're building a virtual production stage right in the heart of Soho. And why now? I mean, for us, it was an obvious choice because obviously we're looking at different options. Do we put in a conventional studio? What do we do? How do we take things forward? And I think because of the location that we're at, because we're right in the middle of London, we're obviously limited on space. We'll be putting in a 10 by 5 meter virtual production stage, but it's we need to make the most out of the space, and virtual production is an obvious way for us to do that.
Do you feel like there's a business case for this since COVID?
Absolutely. I think obviously COVID's helped accelerate, the use of things like virtual production. And I know it's very, I'm speaking, obviously you're speaking about virtual production in a different context. We're speaking about virtual production in the context of LED, Mandalorian, things like that. I mean, I don't see it so much. Obviously, it's got good uses in sci-fi, and it's got good uses in all those kind of things, but I see it as my background's in documentary filmmaking. I've done all sorts of things, and I see lots of uses for it across every kind of section of filmmaking, not just, hey, can we put someone on the moon? Can we do this? Can we do that? I'm thinking about sustainability and how can we bring everything kind of into one place and make it a lot easier and quicker to shoot with more efficient crews and make things kind of much more efficient on every level.
Brilliant, and I want to come back to hear some of the challenges and co-benefits of that shortly. But Darren, would you tell us a little bit about Travlrr? You're not embryonic.
No.
And you work in the commercial space.
I do.
You are on.
Closer.
Tell us a little bit about, though, how things have changed tell us about Travlrr and how things have changed under COVID.
So we launched in 2018 with a sustainable production and technology business, which was generally pushing against a closed door. And I suppose the journey's been mainly with our Green and more recently Albert, but we're helping kind of brands and agencies and governments to create film through education, through technology, through different types of solutions to reduce their carbon footprint, and then measure and start again, and then take them on a journey which reduces it from 100 tonnes or hundreds of thousands of tonnes, and try and get them to kind of a net zero position. So how we do that is by embracing and building a lot of technology. So we have end-to-end cloud-based workflow tools. We use AI technology through the start through to post-production. And then one of the more recent things is how you can store your assets. So there's an incredible amount of waste by people shooting stuff for film, for ads, for documentaries, and it's never used again. Generally because it's sitting on people's laptops, it's sitting on G drives, it's sitting on WeTransfers. Nobody knows where it is. So we're in the process of using AI technology to auto-tag. The Eiffel Tower is a really bad example, but my wife's French, so I use it. And you will have that somewhere in your organisation. So there could be a shot or a scene where you may need it for a virtual studio. You'll have it somewhere in your organisation. So if you start to look at actually your asset management, and we talked about asset management in a different way earlier, you'll actually start to understand and realise how much waste by repeating things you may have done 6 months ago, 1 year ago. So it's a lot of technology that we're using, like these guys, to kind of help brands reduce, or channels, or government tourisms, reduce their carbon footprint.
I mean, 10 Downing Street's a good example, right? Surely we've got thousands and thousands of images of 10 Downing Street. Mike, you're from a broadcaster.
I am, yeah. So I'm a studio manager at Sky. Predominantly our clients are Sky Sports, Sky News, and so we're sort of trying to look at how we can be more sustainable in the way that we produce some of our events broadcasts. So around Sky Sports, we've done a lot of work as a business trying to go into remote production. Less travel, less units going to site, and reduce that side. But then sort of more recently, sort of going towards the kind of future, we're starting to look at like how can we reduce the footprint of that, and go into more sort of virtualized cloud systems to kind of reduce even further what the back end of our production systems is.
Has COVID then supercharged some of these technology? Mike?
100%. So our first sort of flurry into the kind of cloud sort of stuff on a production scale was around COVID response. People were stuck at home. We needed to make programs still, so we started standing up cloud systems and having people remoting into them. But we learnt so much from that it's just given us a springboard into this kind of vast world which we can really expand into, I think.
So I'd love to get a case study out of you. I know you hold your cards close to your chest. But
So I think it would be crazy for us not to talk about the one that's probably most relevant to this event is COP26. So COP26, Sky News came to us. They said, right, we really want to cover COP26, but we want to do it in a really efficient, good, sustainable way. So we worked with them around how do we stand up a cloud-based system to do that. And we wanted to kind of move away from this kind of single software, single system kind of architecture and start building out how we would a traditional outside broadcast or studio. So we had separate sound desks, separate vision mixers, separate graphics engines, all the stuff you would expect, but all working together in the cloud kind of space. And so I kind of refer to it as we had a studio in Glasgow, we had a gallery in the cloud, operated from Osterley, and we ran that 12 hours a day for 2 weeks solid, 14 days. So it was really successful, and the stuff we learned from that about how we can interconnect with all these different locations has just driven us on to bigger and better things. And from a Sky Sports perspective, you know, we took a lot of that learning into the netball, which we've just run 2 seasons of netball, completely like cloud produced.
Brilliant, and great to have these case studies. I'm nodding away. I don't fully understand the cloud, but what I can hear from this is co-benefits. Obviously, my sustainability brain's going ting, 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 but are there other co-benefits, Lucas? You've talked to me a little bit about work-life balance, which I think we may all appreciate a little bit more since COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure many of you are kind of, you've all worked in production and you know the kind of negatives of actually shooting long days. We're all away from home, we're away from our families and things like that. And certainly what's exciting for me as a filmmaker in specific to virtual production and what we're trying to do here in London is, you know, there's 20 million people that can get probably within an hour or just over an hour to the middle of London. And if we could get to the point with technologies like VP or even remote working as well, we could potentially get to a point where we can make the actual production much more sustainable. Because for me, I've got 3 kids. I've got another one on the way. I can't be just going off around the world, whatever, you know, I'm doing, you know, shooting all the time. So for me, it's an exciting opportunity where we can use this technology. Obviously, there's all the exciting, amazing things that we can do with VP from a visual standpoint. But for me, as a parent and as a husband, it's much more exciting that I can continue to be involved within physical production and filmmaking without having to make the sacrifice socially.
Mm-hmm. We worked on an IBC accelerator project recently, and Mike was on the panel with me there. We compared the filming of a Premier League match in a traditional sense with some elements of it filmed with a remote cloud-based workflow. And the aim of this was actually to look at the sustainability and emissions data and compare them. But we noted in our report some other challenges as well, right? And, I know that, Lucas, you're actually from the creative community, but maybe Mike, because you're part of that project, you'd talk about some of the creative challenges then we've got.
Yeah, I think from a kind of a sort of match coverage kind of perspective, you know, it worked. You know, the director came away from that and said, "Yeah, I can do a match cut. You know, that's great." But you know, I think when you start adding some of the presentation piece around that, you know, you still need, you know, that feel. I think a lot of the production teams like to be, you know, close to the action. You know, they want to be there talking to the players and stuff. So you've still got to find a way to incorporate that sort of traditional pitch side kind of presentation into those workflows, and that's the thing. You know, we've got to make sure that we've got the right technologies in place to allow us to do that and have that connectivity still to the location, not just to get sort of some cameras and microphones in, but to get the two-way communication, the two-way vision, you know, so that there's not massive latencies between, you know, site and location and base. Sorry.
Yeah. And nods from the other panelists. So what we learned from that project, and which was a test of a theory, which we kind of guessed the emissions would be lower because there's a lot less travel and need for trucks on match side. But actually, we're missing some data around sustainability. So Lucas and Darren, you both have products that you know are more sustainable, but perhaps we're missing some of the marketing data or to really push, and in Mike's world as well, to really push some of this technology at board level to clients. What if you had an ask of Albert or just in general to academia? What would you ask for? What's the need to help with your sustainability push? Lucas, we'll come to you first.
I think, obviously, speaking from a studio perspective, obviously what would be good for us is to have ways that we can easily measure what we're doing, and maybe some kind of system for us to kind of come on board and with Albert and make sure that what we're doing, I mean, we're going to be generating our own power. We're going to be looking into every way that we can do that. Obviously, the draws of an LED screen are not small, so we're obviously very aware that it's going to be quite a challenge, and we'll obviously be putting in measures like dimming the screen in between recording, things like that, to save on that. So I think in terms of, what would be great from people like Albert is absolutely like giving us the tools that we need to make sure that we can accurately and, we can know exactly what our impact is, so we can make sure that we kind of mitigate as much as we can, and we can offset whatever we have to. That would be key for us. Yeah.
Brilliant. Darren, you're nodding.
I think if I take from a sort of ad green perspective, and I think there's a lot of similarities, is definitely the education, because I find talking lots of clients, they just they haven't heard of ad green or haven't heard of Albert or the collaboration of the two. So more education. I think what's been good, and I'm starting to see, is more associations in different, like Green the Bid in the USA is now adopting ad green, and the Netherlands are going to adopt ad green. So when you're talking to global organisations, that we're all talking about sort of one language, one methodology. I was talking to someone at Mondelez, sort of in the sort of branded content film side, and he said the problem I find from a client perspective is I talk to different associations in different markets, they all say something different. So I think to do a job where we adopt a kind of common currency and a common language would do a lot for all of us going into, whether it be broadcasters, production companies, or clients that are funding film and series.
I hear that. Ad Green's got a custom-built calculator tool for commercial side of things, a bit like Albert for ads. And Mike, have you got a request?
Yeah, I think probably just to start engaging with some of the other kind of technology. You know, Albert to go to the likes of Microsoft and Google and Amazon and go, right, actually, you're wanting to expand your business into the media industries and that media production stuff. You know, we talk to those providers quite a lot. You know, be honest with us. Really start opening up the door and stuff, because I think there's probably a lot of skepticism around actually how green are some of those systems.
Thank you. If you could stay on stage for our questions afterwards. I've not been ignoring you, I promise.
I wonder why I sat this side.
Simon, could you tell us a little bit about your journey with sustainability and introduce yourself and your journey with sustainability?
So I work for the BBC. I work for the public sector part of the BBC in the BBC's technology arm. My journey started really back in about 2008 when two things happened. The first was that Bal Samra, who was our finance director for Telly at the time, in quite an enlightened move, made some money available to start developing a carbon calculator, and I was asked to support that and make some project management resource available, which I was very happy to do. And obviously that carbon calculator became what is now Albert, when in another quite enlightened move from Bal, it was decided we should give that to the industry. The other thing was we used to have, well, we still do have, a review process for all our big technology projects. And the director of technology at the time asked me to look at one. My kind of broadcast expertise domain is audio, and I was looking at it from an audio point of view, and this is in the early days of surround sound and that sort of stuff, which was an area I was working on. But as an engineer, I looked at a lot of the numbers around the power consumption, and I went back to the board and said, I don't think the energy numbers in this stack up. They don't make sense to me. We should be saving more energy. It should be more efficient. It should be lower carbon. And it just kind of grew from that point. And I started to get involved in reviewing more and more of our work and trying to make our technology more sustainable, to the point where in June this year, it actually became part of my job title. So after 14 years of working on it. But to me, that was a bit ironic, because one of the things I've always said about sustainability is actually we want to watch having too many experts, because otherwise the responsibility tends to get outsourced to the expertise. And I'm a strong believer that it should be a core competency for us all. It's a professional skill that we should all have, in the way that we worry about information security, and we worry about mental health, and we worry about safety at work and stuff. Thinking about sustainability issues is a really important key competency for us all, I think. And I think that panel shows it, actually, because that's kind of how you guys have all got involved in this, right?
You're not allowed to interact with those.
Oh, right.
No, the reason I separated Simon is because I wanted to focus a little bit on production, and then Simon, you work on, I guess, a bit of a different holistic point of view and a different stream of this side of things. How's COVID changed your work, some of your workflows?
Can I go on a quick digression here? I said I'd do this. I did warn you. I think this is useful and relevant because at the moment we're celebrating 100 years of the BBC, and means a lot to me. I think it should mean a lot to the UK. But the BBC has two mottos. Do you know what the two mottos of the BBC are? There's an English language motto, which was the first motto, which is "Nations shall speak peace, unto nation, which was a great motto, and we still fully subscribe to it. Obviously, as you know, the BBC founded in 1922. In the 1930s and 40s, that motto became a bit problematic during a global war. So the BBC coined a second motto, which is in Latin, which is cacunque. It's taken from St. Paul's letter to the Philippians, and the Philippians rather, and I understand that it means whatsoever. And the idea is it's whatsoever is necessary, whatsoever it takes, whatsoever is good and just. And that seemed much more appropriate for a global war and the role of a public sector broadcaster at that point. I think there should be a third BBC motto, though, which is, it depends. So in answer to your question, it kind of depends. So one of the big challenges that we faced, and a lot of what I do is now about big systems, but we've suddenly moved 20,000 employees from our buildings to working at home. And I'm sure this is something that a lot of you have had to do, right? And then we started to think about, well, obviously that's great for the planet, right? But is it? Is it actually that good for the planet? And the big problem is we don't have much data, because we've taken people who have come into work and we can acquire data about their habits and their behaviours. We know what power they're using. We can make sure that that power is sustainably procured. We can make sure that the buildings are energy efficient. We can control the air and the temperature. They put waste in bins. We can manage the waste streams, all that sort of things. And a lot of people, particularly in London, are coming in on public transport, and those trains were running anyway. So we weren't really saving a huge amount on the carbon footprint there. Now, there's a very interesting piece of work that was done, I think, about 2019, but really well-timed for the lockdown, by a consultancy called EcoAct. I recommend you look it up. It's about home working. It's some very early numbers on how that works in terms of carbon footprint. EcoAct is now owned by Atos, the large IT consultancy, but they do some great work. And basically, what they say is that home energy is the biggest determinant in kind of your carbon footprint. And so basically, they think that in the summer, it's a great idea for everybody to work at home, and in the winter, it's a really bad one, because of the efficiency of UK housing stock and uncertainty about how people buy their energy and stuff like that. So this is one of the things that we've learned. We also don't know a great deal about how much people keep their computers and stuff switched on. And one of the big things I've been working on is just trying to switch stuff off. And I think we heard that when the guys were talking about generators, right? We have tended to use energy as a solution for problems like resilience and reliability and business continuity. We've just thrown energy at the problem, and now we've got to think a lot smarter about that. And if we use less energy, what other techniques can we use to make sure that our stuff doesn't become less reliable, we don't put our business at risk? And once again, data is really, really key to that. We need more information, and we need it in a more timely fashion. And I guess one of the things that, on the data side, that's really important from an Albert point of view, I'm sure lots of you have probably done Albert submissions on behalf of productions and stuff. And I can bet that for a lot of you, it's not your favourite job, right? Because it means going around and asking people for numbers that they don't have and pestering them to give it to you because they've got other priorities and, you know, you're at the bottom of the list. So one of the things that we're trying to do, and this is not straightforward or easy, is find sources of data across our business that are either exact replicants or good proxies that we can feed in and we can draw out using automatic techniques, using APIs. We can pull that data from systems, pre-existing systems, scheduling systems, planning systems, reporting systems, and start to feed that into our carbon reporting data. So it frees up a lot of time.
Thank you. You've answered all my questions. That was brilliant. Thank you very much.
Can I bring up one last thing before I go? Because the other... Yeah, I'm sorry, I did say that. And we're looking to the future, right? But we can learn a lot from the past. And one of the more interesting things that I think is there's a Victorian economist called William Stanley Jevons. I know he sounds like a character from a prison sitcom, but he was actually, and in 1865, he produced a really interesting paper. And at that point, the UK was industrialising rapidly, right in the middle of the Industrial Revolution, and we were using an awful lot of coal to power steam engines, effectively. And the UK government was worried that the supply of coal would mean that we couldn't fully continue to industrialise and we'd have a shortage of coal. But about that time in 1865, there was a big change in the design of steam engines. We were moving basically from something based on Newcomen's design, the big beam engine, to Stephenson's much more efficient condensing engine. And these engines were 3, 4, 5, 10 times more efficient than the Newcomen existing design. So everybody went, brilliant, the problem is solved. But Jevons postulated a paradox, because what happened was it became cheaper to own and operate a steam engine, and steam engines were much smaller. So people found uses for steam engines that they hadn't previously considered. And so actually the number of steam engines in the UK economy increased massively, and therefore coal consumption, despite that efficiency, increased massively. And so I think one of our challenges as we look at some of these things in a big systems way is to make sure that when we take the friction out, we take it out permanently, and we don't allow growth to replace it. On the first panel, there was a really interesting point about, yeah, I can sell this stuff back, or I can make cost savings, and I can return that money to the production. And in many ways, that's great. But I think one of the bigger challenges for us all, if we look at sustainability in the whole, is to wonder what that money's going to get used for. Because if it just goes and buys a load more diesel vehicles or something, it's been a bit counterproductive. And so I think it's, as we get better at the small stuff, we also have to get better at the big stuff.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we've been on some tangents in this interview and panel. Who would have thought, if we look into the future, we're talking about steam engines, so thank you very much. I've heard that we need sustainability to be a core competency of lots of our jobs, that there's co-benefits to some of this tech, not least sustainability benefits, but some challenges, particularly around some of the data collections. So I have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions before I need to wrap up with some housekeeping.
I'm Neil Romanek from Feed, and thanks for bringing up Jevons paradox, which I was actually wondering, if I can get more stuff for cheaper, I'm just going to get more stuff. But I wondered about, in looking at the cloud and offloading stuff to the cloud, how do you see that as something to keep an eye on? Because I think there is something about, we'll just put it up in the cloud, and that means that it's just not our problem anymore. And you mentioned Jeff Bezos. It's like Jeff Bezos will solve the problem for us, and he promises he will solve the problem. So how does that work in terms of crunching the numbers with carbon and offloading stuff to a cloud provider that you don't necessarily have control over?
Yeah, so there's a few things with that. So I think, first off, yes, you've got that kind of, okay, right, it's on the cloud, it's somebody else's problem. But where we can go, right, well, we know what's ours because we know how long it's been running for. And when we get to an end of a production, we turn something off. We are very good. We do not leave systems running. This stuff we're architecting, we make sure that stuff is turned off, or even auto turning off when we know it's like core systems and we haven't got productions on. We're very good at turning off our use of that. So we know that we're kind of capturing that kind of side, or we're doing our bit to capture that side. Yes, okay, we turn it off, but somebody else might use it, but that's now their calculation, not ours. But I think, the other thing we can look at with the kind of the cloud and the virtualization of stuff is, not just the cost of the cloud stuff, but, let's look at, our kind of production workflows. We know that COP26, for example, if we were going to do that in a gallery at Osterley as a remote production, that gallery would have had 12 bays of equipment. That's 12 bays being powered, 12 bays that need air conditioning. It ran on 12 computers on a couple of servers in another data center. So just, we don't know the facts and figures yet. We're still sort of trying to get that stuff. But, we know that from a power consumption and air conditioning, we've already massively shrunk that sort of side of things. But where it's going to give us benefits is we can start decentralizing our operations. At Sky, we've gone, right, we're going to do remote production, everybody back at base, or core team back at base and smaller bits outside. Well, now actually what we can start doing is sort of moving our operations as well. So we now go, right, well, let's build production hubs. They're all hooking into the same systems, but we can start reducing the travel, because we go, right, rather than moving our crew to a production, let's start looking at moving our production to a crew. You know, if the talent is in Glasgow or, you know, Leeds, Birmingham, you know, we could have people going to those sites. You know, we've already started doing that with sort of one of our bureaus. We've started building out a replay operation. The hardware is in Osterley, but the replay operators all go to that site. You know, and there's, you know, sort of more sustainable kind of like charging and stuff there for the vehicles. You know, so, you know, we're starting to look and get that kind of mentality of where can we use the technology that, yes, we know is still going to have a cost, but how can that help unlock other savings?
That was a great question. I'm really pleased you answered that.
Just add to that, because our you know, like these guys said, we've got 1,200 small, medium, large production companies connected through a platform that have been vetted, created, interviewed. We educate them with a kind of handbook on how to be sustainable on the ground. But the tool or the cloud is just the facilitator to let you do that. And actually the carbon savings are exactly what you just said. We're not flying anyone. Every now and then might be a DOP and a director goes. But we're shooting in Cancun, Singapore, Mississippi, Michigan, somewhere else. All now, no one's moving. We're using all the tools, the workflow. We did a campaign last year for the government of Japan during COVID, during Olympics, and an absolute nightmare when it landed. But we pulled it off with our teams in Japan. All the post-production was done in the UK. We filmed Uma Thurman in New York because she was the front of the campaign. Nobody moved. But the only way you can do that and reduce your carbon footprint massively, on average about 90%, is by having this cloud-based workflow tool. So just think of it as the facilitator to leverage other ways of saving carbon. Because otherwise you can't, can you, without that?
Thank you. Yeah, great augmentation to that question. Thank you very much. Our esteemed panellists are going to be around for your questions. If you've got any more, do grab them. Thank you so much, panellists.